Us Americans remember the 1920s as a major cultural shock that heavily impacted America. Jazz was becoming increasingly popular, and with that, dance was changing. Silent films were taking over the screen, and then technology was developing with it. Looking back, it seems that the 1920s was a time of luxury and change. However, the 1920s is not what it appears to be. The Ku Klux Klan, or more commonly known as the KKK, was formed on December 24, 1865. After the Civil War was over, many Southern Americans were against the idea of African Americans being free. So, in response, they created the KKK. The KKK's goal was to spread hate and intolerance to groups like African Americans in order to dehumanize them. The KKK was known for their violence and lynchings of African Americans. Over time, the group had fallen due to growth of cultural acceptance in our society, but as recently as 2016, the group has spiked in popularity. Some suspect it to be due to our president, Donald Trump, while others suspect it to be due to the shootings of African Americans done by Caucasian police officers. By looking at the Ku Klux Klan's history, we can see their popularity, success, and impact in the United States is important because the Klan's influence has left a large mark on the American political scene as well as how we view each other in society today. The Klan was not popular in Indiana until the 1920s, and many people who did join the Second Era Klan did not necessarily have the intents the first Klan did. Yes, they also attempted to dehumanize African Americans, but many who did join were fearful of the new social changes in their society. In the 1920s, alcohol, sex, and jazz was very common, and many people feared that these would decline family values. The Klan took this fear and used it as a promotional tactic, stating that if people joined the Klan, they would be able to stop these family values from declining, which caused the Klan to immediately surge in popularity as well as membership. The Klan was primarily known for targeting immigrants, African Americans, as well as Catholics. They would use anything from propaganda to legislative pressure to spread their message. The Klan appeared not to have any hate for women, though. In Women of the Klan, Racism and Gender in the 1920s by Kathleen M. Blee, she states how women were able to promote the Klan more because they were able to hide under a facade, making them a lot more successful. Intimidation was a tactic the Klan would use, and they would often burn crosses in a person's yard, or they would put ads in the Friday Cross, which was a Klan-based newspaper. These ads would often tell people to boycott certain businesses for whom they hired, or businesses and their owners who refused to join the Klan. The Klan would also use persuasion as a tactic to recruit members. They would do this by handing out pamphlets and events where people could come and learn more about the Klan. And the Klan would even produce their own music to help spread their message as well. The Klan was also known for their large events and rallies, which they would use to create a community. One of the biggest rallies took place in Kokomo's Bethela Park on June 30th through June 4th in 1923. Besides holding rallies, the Klan was also involved with both the Democratic and Republican Party and voted for people who upheld their values. One example is the election of 1924, when Republican Edward L. Jackson was elected as Indiana's governor. Jackson was very close to Stevenson, who is the Grand Dragon of Indiana's Klan. He was able to help Jackson win by influencing the Klan through various media outlets. Over time, the Klan was able to obtain influence over many political leaders, making it much easier for them to pass certain laws. However, many of their laws did not pass, and people began to speak out against the Klan. Stevenson was born on August 21st, 1891, in Houston, Texas. Around the 1920s, Stevenson made his way up to Indiana in hopes of a job. Shortly after, he joined the Klan in Evansville. He quickly rose through the ranks, and on July 4th, 1923, he was inducted as Indiana's Grand Dragon. And by the end of the year, Indiana had one of the largest Klan memberships in America. Stevenson was a strong leader. However, he had a strong lust for alcohol and attractive women, which bring his eventual fall.
Well, Stevenson was a charlatan, a fake, and evil, wicked. He was a very smart leader, however. He fooled a lot of people. He was a salesman. He was a very good salesman. He could sell anything, and he could certainly sell the Klan. He sold lots and lots of Klan memberships. He convinced lots and lots of people to join him, including the man who became governor of Indiana, Ed Jackson. He and Jackson were very close. But he was also despite the Klan's view on prohibition and morality, he was a hard drinker. He engaged in sex with many different women.
It was 1925. Madge Oberheiser was invited to meet Stevenson. When she arrived, Stevenson was very intoxicated and offered her a drink. Immediately, she said no, but Stevenson was persistent, and from there, the situation escalated. She was brought into his car and held at gunpoint, where she was violently raped and sexually assaulted. The next day, Oberheiser was able to escape Stevenson from their Chicago hotel room, and out of desperation and shame, she consumed a bottle of mercury pills. In her final days, she testified against Stevenson, and he was convicted of second-degree murder. Shortly after, more scandals soon came out about the Klan, with politicians like Jackson, and the Klan began to lose its grip on Indiana. Over the past couple years, white supremacy groups, like the KKK, have spiked in popularity, and some conclude it to be due to our president, Donald Trump. According to Vox, David Duke, the former imperial wizard, states that they are going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump, and that by voting for him, they will be able to take back America. He then reminds Trump that it was the white Americans who put him in the presidency, not what he calls the radical leftists.
After the riots in Charlottesville, where one side, the white nationalists, were chanting horrendous racist things, anti-Semitic shouts and chants, and Trump said after that that there were good people on both sides. Well, that simply is not true.
However, Trump has stated many times that he does not support the Ku Klux Klan. Many people are beginning to associate the rise of the Klan with the many shootings of African American men. In early 2018, Stephen Clark was in his grandmother's backyard, waiting to be let in. At the same time, police were responding to a burglary report. When investigating, they found Clark and began to hit him with multiple rounds. Clark was shot 8 times. The police claimed that he had a weapon on him, but it was later discovered he only had his phone, and police officers were questioned to be murderers. Madison states that in situations like these, it is often hard to tell whether or not one is a Klansman because they would usually be on such a low profile. Even though it is a possibility, most of the time these shootings are purely accidental and don't mean to happen at all. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan was not necessarily viewed as a bad thing. At its peak, Indiana had about 250,000 members, while nationally the membership ranged from 3 million to as high as 8 million. Even if one was not in the Klan, they valued their opinions and saw them as a good group in society. One example is the lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abraham Smith in 1930. We can see in this photo that no one is in sympathy for these two men, and they're just smiling, laughing, seeing it as a normal everyday thing. Many with blank faces, and one man even pointing, symbolizing that other African Americans were next. However, today is much different. Earlier this year, Ralph Northam, the current governor of Virginia, was involved in a controversy surrounding a yearbook page. On his page, there is one image where 2 males, one in KKK attire and the other in blackface. Mr. Northam then proceeded to acknowledge that the photo was clearly racist and offensive, admitting that he dressed as either of the 2 men. People were furious, and he got calls of resignation and that he should resign from his position. This shows us that today we find the KKK as not a normal group. We find them as a disgusting, intolerable group that society should not have, showing that we as Americans have grown and that our cultural acceptance is greater than ever and that the KKK is dying out. Overall, we cannot completely blame this disgusting group for all the wrongdoings in our society, such as our government and our police force. Over time, different groups have stained society in ways that have completely changed the way we think. If there is one thing that every person really does know, is that the Klan's impact will forever be felt by Americans.